The cell was cold, and the walls were made of something that looked like glass. And Ambassador Marcus Cole had been counting the cycles since they took him from the diplomatic station near the outer colonias. 37 cycles. That was how long he had been a prisoner aboard the Valorian flagship. And in all that time, he had never once tried to escape or fight back or even raise his voice in anger. The Valorians did not understand this at all. They were an insectoid species, tall and covered in natural armor that shimmered like oil on water. And they had conquered more than 80 worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their empire was ancient, and their queen was feared by every species that knew her name. And when they looked at the human sitting quietly in his cell, they saw nothing but weakness. "Look at him," one of the guards would say to another as they walked past his cell. "No claws, no armor, no venom glands. Nothing but soft pink skin that bleeds so easily." The other guard would make a clicking sound that passed for laughter among their kind, and they would move on, never giving the human another thought. But there were others aboard the ship who watched Marcus Cole with much more interest. And chief among them was Queen Sithara herself. She was ancient beyond human understanding, having ruled the Valorian dominion for more than 1,000 cycles. And she had seen countless species rise and fall beneath her conquest. Some had been powerful, with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop stars. And she had broken them all. Some had been clever, with tricks and traps and hidden technologies. And she had seen through every deception. Some had been numerous, with billions upon billions of soldiers ready to die for their worlds. And she had ground them all to dust. But humans troubled her in a way she could not quite explain. Her advisors told her that Earth was a small world orbiting an unremarkable star in an unimportant corner of the galaxy. And they told her that humans had only been traveling among the stars for a few hundred years, which was nothing compared to the Valorian Empire. They told her that humans were physically weak, that they could not survive in vacuum, that they could not regenerate damaged limbs, that they could not even see in the ultraviolet spectrum like every civilized species in the galaxy by every measure that mattered. Humans should have been conquered long ago. And yet, they had not been. This was the thing that troubled Queen Sithara most of all. She had sent 3 fleets to subjugate Earth over the past century, each one larger and more powerful than the last. And each one had simply vanished. No distress signals, no debris fields, no survivors. Nothing at all. It was as if her ships had sailed into a black hole and ceased to exist. And no amount of investigation had revealed what happened to them when her spies reported that a human ambassador would be traveling through the outer territories with minimal escort. She had ordered his capture immediately. She needed to understand what humans really were. And the only way to do that was to study one up close. Marcus Cole was brought before her on the 3rd day of his captivity, and she had examined him with all 6 of her eyes, while her scientists scanned him with every device they possessed. "Fascinating," the lead scientist had reported. "His bones are dense but brittle compared to ours. His muscles are strong for his size, but nothing remarkable. His senses are limited to a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum, and his lifespan is laughably short. Then how do they survive?" The Queen had demanded. "We do not know, Your Majesty," the scientist admitted. "By all biological metrics, this species should have gone extinct on their homeworld long before they ever reached the stars." Queen Sithara had dismissed the scientist and turned her attention back to the human, who stood before her without chains, because she wanted to see what he would do when given the illusion of freedom. He did nothing at all. He simply stood there, watching her with those strange round eyes that had only 1 pupil each. And he waited. "You do not try to run," she observed, her voice a deep resonance that came from somewhere in her thorax. "You do not try to fight. You do not even try to negotiate for your release. Why is that?" Marcus Cole smiled, and it was a strange expression that the Queen had learned meant Many different things among humans, because there is no point, he said. And his voice was calm and steady. I could not outrun your guards. I could not defeat them in combat. And you would not release me no matter what I offered. So why waste energy on pointless gestures? A practical answer, the Queen admitted. But most prisoners beg, they weep. They make threats they cannot keep. They promise anything and everything in exchange for their lives. I am not most prisoners, Marcus replied. No, the Queen agreed, leaning forward on her throne to study him more closely. You are not. And that is what concerns me. She kept him in comfort after that, giving him food that approximated human nutrition and quarters that were almost pleasant by Valorian standards. She visited him often, asking questions about Earth, about human history, about the way his people thought and felt and dreamed. He answered some questions and deflected others. Always polite but never truly helpful, and the Queen found herself growing more and more fascinated by him one evening. As the ship's artificial light cycle dimmed to simulate night, she came to his quarters and found him sitting by the viewport, staring out at the stars. Do you miss your home? She asked him. Every moment of every day, he admitted without turning around. Then why do you not despair? She pressed. You are far from your world, surrounded by enemies, with no hope of rescue. Yet you sit there as calmly as if you were on vacation. Marcus finally turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes that she had not seen before. Something old and patient and absolutely unafraid. Because you have not seen what we really are, he said quietly. You see this body and you think you understand humans, but you understand nothing at all. The Queen felt a strange sensation then, something she had not experienced in centuries, and it took her a moment to recognize it as unease. Then enlighten me, she commanded. Tell me what humans really are. Marcus smiled again, but this time there was no warmth in it. Only a kind of ancient knowing that seemed far too old for his young face. Not yet, he said, turning back to the stars. When the time is right, you will see for yourself, and then you will understand why your fleets never returned. The Queen left his quarters that night with more questions than answers. And for the first time in 1,000 years, she found herself unable to sleep. There was something about this human, something hidden beneath that soft skin and those fragile bones. And she was beginning to suspect that whatever it was far more dangerous than anything she had ever conquered before. But she was Queen Cythara of the Valorian Dominion, and she had never backed down from a challenge in her entire existence. If humans had a secret, she would discover it, and if they had a weakness, she would exploit it. She would break this human the way she had broken countless others. And then she would finally take Earth for her empire. She was absolutely certain of this. What she did not know, what she could not possibly know, was that Marcus Cole was counting on exactly that. The test began on the 42nd cycle, and Queen Cythara watched every single one from her observation chamber high above the laboratories. Her scientists had designed a series of trials meant to push the human to his absolute limits, to find the breaking point that every species possessed, and to document exactly how fragile these strange soft creatures really were. First test was temperature. They placed Marcus in a chamber and slowly raised the heat until the air itself seemed to shimmer and boil. Watching to see how quickly his body would fail, most species would have collapsed within minutes, their biological processes shutting down as proteins began to break apart. But Marcus did something unexpected. He started to sweat. The Valorian scientists had never seen anything like it, and they clustered around their instruments in confusion as water poured from the human skin, coating him in a layer of moisture that evaporated almost as quickly as it appeared. What is happening? The Queen demanded over the communication system. His body is cooling itself, the lead scientist reported in amazement. He is releasing water through his skin and the evaporation is carrying heat away from his core. It is incredibly inefficient, but somehow it is working. They raised the temperature higher and higher, and Marcus suffered. There was no question about that. His face turned red, and his breathing became heavy, and his movements grew slow and sluggish. But he did not collapse. He did not die. They finally ended the test when the chamber reached temperatures that would have killed any other known species, and Marcus walked out on his own 2 feet. Exhausted but alive. Remarkable. The Queen murmured the next test was cold. They dropped the temperature until frost formed on every surface, and the air became so cold that it hurt to breathe. And they watched to see how the human would respond. Marcus shivered, his body shaking violently as his muscles contracted over and over again. And the scientists recorded this with great interest. His body is generating heat through involuntary muscle movement. One of them reported, "It is keeping his core temperature stable, even as the ambient temperature drops far below what should be survivable." They pushed the cold further and further, and Marcus curled into a ball and wrapped his arms around himself, his lips turning blue and his fingers going white. But still he did not die when they finally ended the test. He stood up slowly and rubbed his hands together until the color returned. And then he looked directly at the observation window and smiled. The Queen did not smile back. The third test was starvation. They stopped giving Marcus food and waited to see how long his body could survive without nutrients, expecting him to weaken and fail within a few cycles at most. But cycles passed, and then more cycles passed. And Marcus grew thin, and his face became gaunt, and his movements became slower. But his eyes remained sharp, and his mind remained clear. How is this possible? The Queen demanded on the 15th cycle of starvation. Any other species would be dead by now. His body is consuming itself, the scientist explained. It is breaking down stored fat and then muscle tissue, converting them into energy to keep his vital organs functioning. It is like watching a machine burn its own parts to keep running. That sounds like desperation. The Queen observed. It is, the scientist agreed. But it is also incredibly effective. This species evolved on a world where food was not always available, and their bodies adapted to survive extended periods of scarcity. They ended the starvation test before Marcus died, because the Queen wanted him alive for the final trial, the arena test. This was the one that truly showed her what humans were capable of. And it was the one that would haunt her dreams for cycles to come. The arena was a massive, circular chamber at the heart of the flagship, used for entertainment and for breaking the spirits of conquered peoples. And the Queen filled it with warriors from a dozen different species. There was a Krethian, a massive beast, covered in thick scales with claws that could tear through metal. There was a synth mind, a cyborg creature with reflexes faster than thought and targeting systems that never missed. There was a pair of Varax hunters, pack predators with venomous fangs and the ability to see heat signatures in total darkness, and there were others, each one selected because they represented the deadliest traits of their respective species. Marcus was given no weapons, no armor, nothing but the thin clothes he had been wearing since his capture. "This is your final test," the Queen announced over the arena's speaker system. "Defeat these opponents, and I will answer any question you ask. Fail, and you will die." Those are the terms. Marcus looked around at the creatures surrounding him, each one bigger and stronger and faster than he was. And then he nodded. "I accept." He said. The Krethian attacked first, charging across the arena with a roar that shook the walls. And Marcus did something that no one expected. He ran away, not in a straight line, but in a curving path that forced the Krethian to change direction. And again he dodged and weaved and refused to stand still. "What is he doing?" one of the Queen's advisors asked in confusion. "He cannot outrun it forever. Watch," the Queen commanded. Because she was beginning to understand. The Krethian was fast in short bursts, but it was not built for sustained pursuit, and within minutes it was slowing down. Its massive legs trembling with exhaustion. Marcus was tired too, his chest heaving and sweat pouring down his face. But he was not slowing down. He kept running, kept moving, kept forcing the Crethian to chase him until finally the beast collapsed to its knees, completely spent, and that was when Marcus attacked. He picked up a loose piece of metal from the arena floor and drove it into the gap between the Crethian's scales, finding a weak point that should have been invisible to anyone who had not spent the last 10 minutes studying the creature's movements. The Crethian fell and did not get up. Impossible, the advisor whispered. The synth mine was next, and it was faster than anything Marcus could hope to match. Its mechanical limbs a blur as it launched a barrage of strikes that would have killed any normal opponent. But Marcus had been watching this creature too, and he had noticed something that the Valorians had not. The synth mind relied on its targeting systems to predict where opponents would be, and it became confused when those predictions were wrong. Marcus moved erratically, randomly, with no pattern at all, and the synth mind's attacks began to miss by wider and wider margins as its systems struggled to adapt. When the opening came, Marcus took it, jamming his fingers into a seam in the creature's armor and ripping out a handful of wires. The synth mind collapsed in a shower of sparks. The Varax hunters were more careful, circling Marcus like the pack predators they were, waiting for him to show weakness before they struck. They could see his heat signature, could track every movement he made, and they were patient enough to wait for the perfect moment. But Marcus understood pack hunters, because humans had hunted alongside wolves for thousands of years, and he knew that the key to defeating them was to break their coordination. He feinted at one and then attacked the other, forcing them to choose between helping their partner and protecting themselves. And in that moment of hesitation, he struck. One Varax went down with a broken leg, and the other panicked and attacked alone. And Marcus caught it by the throat and squeezed until it stopped moving. The other opponents fell one by one, each defeated not through superior strength or speed, but through observation and adaptation, and a refusal to give up no matter how badly the odds were stacked against him. When the last opponent finally fell, Marcus stood in the center of the arena, covered in blood that was both his and theirs, his body trembling with exhaustion. And he looked up at the royal observation deck where Queen Sithara sat. "What are you?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the arena. Marcus wiped the blood from his face and smiled that terrible smile that had no warmth in it at all. "We call it adrenaline," he said. "When we are hurt, when we are scared, when we are pushed to our limits, our bodies flood with chemicals that make us stronger and faster, and able to ignore pain that would cripple us under normal circumstances." He took a step toward the observation deck, and the queen found herself leaning back in her throne. "And that," Marcus continued, "is just the beginning of what we can do." 3 cycles after the arena, Queen Sithara summoned Marcus Cole to her throne chamber. And this time she dismissed all of her guards, except for the 100 elite warriors, who lined the walls with weapons ready. She had not slept since watching him defeat opponents that should have torn him apart. And she needed answers before her invasion fleet departed for Earth. Marcus walked into the chamber without chains, because the queen wanted to see if freedom would change his behavior. And he stopped at the base of her throne and waited. "You have earned the right to ask a question," the queen reminded him. "That was the agreement, I remember," Marcus said. "But I do not need to ask a question. I already know everything I need to know. Then I will ask the questions," the queen replied, her 6 eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that would have broken most prisoners. "Your species is weak by every measure that matters, yet you survive and even thrive. Explain this to me." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was calm and steady and carried to every corner of the massive chamber. "You have studied our bodies," he said. Your scientists have measured our bones and weighed our muscles and counted our cells. And they have told you that we are fragile, that we are slow, that we are blind and deaf and helpless compared to the great species of the galaxy. They have told me the truth. The Queen agreed. They have told you facts, Marcus corrected. Facts are not the same as truth. The truth is something you cannot measure with instruments or quantify with numbers. The truth is what happens when you push a human to the point where they should give up. And they refuse. He began to walk as he spoke, pacing slowly back and forth before the throne. And the guards tensed, but did not move. Let me tell you about my ancestors, Marcus said. Millions of years ago, we were not the dominant species on our world. We were prey, small and weak, and constantly hunted by creatures with bigger teeth and sharper claws. Then how did you survive? The Queen asked. We ran, Marcus replied simply, but not the way you would expect. We did not run in short bursts like the creatures that hunted us. We ran slowly and steadily for hours and hours, until the predators that were chasing us collapsed from exhaustion. The Queen made a sound of disbelief. That is impossible. No creature can outrun a predator by moving slower. We did not outrun them, Marcus explained. We outlasted them. Our bodies evolved to shed heat through sweat. Our legs evolved to carry us for distances that no other land animal could match. And our minds evolved to track our prey across territories that took days to cross. He stopped pacing and looked directly at the Queen. We are persistence hunters, he said. We do not need to be faster or stronger. We only need to keep going when everything else has stopped. The Queen considered this, turning the information over in her ancient mind. Interesting, but surely it is a primitive survival trait. Surely it does not translate to warfare. You would think that, Marcus agreed. But you would be wrong. He began to tell her stories then. Stories of human history that span thousands of years. And with each story, the Queen felt her unease grow deeper. He told her about soldiers who marched through frozen wastelands where the temperature dropped so low that their equipment froze solid, and how they kept marching because surrender meant death. He told her about explorers who sailed across oceans on wooden ships, knowing that they might never see land again, knowing that disease and storms and starvation waited for them, and how they sailed anyway because the need to know what lay beyond the horizon was stronger than the fear of death. He told her about prisoners who survived years of torture by retreating into their own minds, building mental fortresses that their captors could never breach, emerging broken in body but unbroken in spirit. He told her about mothers who had lifted vehicles off their trapped children, performing feats of strength that should have been physically impossible, because the love they felt for their offspring temporarily overrode every limitation their bodies possessed. We call it hysterical strength, Marcus said. And scientists still do not fully understand how it works. All they know is that when a human is desperate enough, when the stakes are high enough, our bodies can do things that should be impossible. The Queen leaned forward on her throne. You speak of individuals, of exceptional cases, but war is not won by individuals. War is won by armies and fleets and resources. You are wrong, Marcus said flatly. War is won by will, by the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory, by the refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat is certain. He took a step closer to the throne, and this time the guards did move. Raising their weapons, Marcus ignored them completely. Every species you have conquered had a breaking point, he continued. A point where they decided that survival was more important than resistance. A point where they surrendered because continuing to fight seemed pointless. Yes, the Queen agreed. That is the nature of all living things, not humans, Marcus said. And his voice had dropped to something low and dangerous. We do not have a breaking point. We have a point where we stop thinking about survival and start thinking about revenge. That is foolish. The Queen scoffed. Revenge accomplishes nothing if you are dead. You think that because you do not understand us, Marcus replied. Let me explain it in terms you might comprehend. He stopped directly in front of the throne, close enough that the nearest guards could have cut him down in an instant. When you threaten something a human loves, he said slowly, we do not calculate the odds of success. We do not weigh the costs and benefits. We do not consider whether fighting back is logical or sensible or likely to succeed. His eyes met the Queen's, and there was something ancient and terrible burning behind them. We simply decide that whoever threatened what we love is going to die. And then we do whatever it takes to make that happen. Even if it takes years, even if it takes generations, even if it costs us everything we have. The Queen found herself unable to look away from those strained round eyes. You're missing fleets, Marcus said softly. Do you want to know what happened to them? Tell me, the Queen commanded, though her voice was not quite as steady as she would have liked. They attacked Earth, Marcus said. They came to conquer us, to enslave us, to take our world, and when they did that, they became enemies of humanity. He smiled, and it was the coldest smile the Queen had ever seen. We do not let our enemies live, Marcus said. We do not accept their surrender. We do not take prisoners. We do not show mercy. Not to those who try to harm our home. Your fleets did not disappear. Your Majesty. He leaned forward until his face was close enough that she could see the blood vessels in his eyes. They are trophies now. Their ships hang in museums on Earth as warnings to anyone else who might be foolish enough to try what they tried. And their crews, well, he straightened up and stepped back. Let us just say that humanity has a long memory, and we never forget a lesson once we learn it. The Queen sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. You are trying to frighten me, she said finally. You are trying to make me believe that humans are some kind of unstoppable force. No, Marcus replied. I am trying to warn you. There is a difference. Warn me of what? Marcus looked around the throne room at the guards with their weapons, and the ancient stone walls and the vast empty space that was meant to make visitors feel small and insignificant. You think you understand war, he said. You think you understand conquest. You have dominated this galaxy for 1,000 years, and you have never faced anything you could not defeat. He turned back to the Queen. But you have never faced us. Not really. You have poked at us and prodded at us and sent fleets to test our defenses. But you have never truly committed to destroying us. And if I do? The Queen asked. Marcus smiled one last time. Then you will learn why the galaxy has learned to leave us alone. And by the time you understand what you have done, it will be far too late to undo it. Queen Sithara laughed, and it was a sound like glass scraping against stone, echoing through the throne chamber with a coldness that would have frozen the blood of lesser beings. Bold words, she said, for a prisoner standing alone in the heart of my power, surrounded by warriors who could kill you before you took another breath. Marcus nodded slowly. You are right. I am alone. I am unarmed. I am surrounded by enemies, by every measure that matters. I am completely helpless. Then perhaps you should show more fear, the Queen suggested, her 6 eyes glittering with something between amusement and annoyance. Fear is a luxury, Marcus replied. And I gave it up a long time ago. He reached up toward his face, and every guard in the chamber raised their weapons, but Marcus only touched his own mouth, pressing against one of his teeth. You wanted to know humanity's true power, he said. Let me show you something. He pulled, and with a small click, one of his teeth came free. The Queen watched in confusion as Marcus held up the tiny white object, turning it so that the light caught it from different angles. A false tooth, Marcus explained. Inside is a device so small that your scanners could not detect it. A device that has been broadcasting our location since the moment I was captured. The Queen went very still. You see, Marcus continued, I was not taken prisoner by accident. I was not captured because your forces were better than ours. I volunteered for this mission. You volunteered to be captured? The Queen demanded, her voice rising with disbelief. We needed to find your homeworld, Marcus said simply. Your empire is vast, and your worlds are many, but your seat of power, your throne world, that has been hidden from us for decades. He gestured around at the chamber, until now. Alarms began to sound throughout the ship, piercing wails that echoed through every corridor and chamber. And the Queen's personal communicator began to flash with urgent signals. She answered it, and the voice of her fleet commander came through, high and panicked in a way she had never heard before. Your Majesty, we have contacts. Thousands of contacts dropping out of faster than light travel all around the system. They are everywhere. The entire home system is surrounded. The Queen rose from her throne, all 6 of her legs carrying her toward the tactical display that shimmered to life in the center of the chamber. What? She saw there made even her ancient heart skip a beat. Ships. Human ships filled the display like stars in the night sky. And they were still appearing. More and more of them emerging from faster than light travel every second. They were not elegant ships. Not like the sleek vessels of the Valorian fleet. They were angular and harsh and ugly, built for function rather than form. Covered in weapons that bristled from every surface. How many? The Queen whispered, We are still counting. The fleet commander replied, Initial estimates suggest more than 10,000 vessels of various sizes, with more arriving every minute. 10,000 ships. The Queen turned to look at Marcus, who stood calmly in the center of the throne room, watching the tactical display with an expression of quiet satisfaction. You planned this, she said. From the very beginning, this was always the plan. Yes, Marcus admitted. We knew that capturing one of our diplomats would be irresistible to you. We knew that you would bring me here, to your homeworld, to study and interrogate and eventually kill. And we knew that as long as I was alive, this beacon would continue to broadcast. You sacrificed yourself, the Queen said. And there was something almost like respect in her voice. You let yourself be captured and tortured and humiliated, all to lead us into a trap. Not a trap, Marcus corrected. A demonstration. The tactical display flickered, and a message began to broadcast on every frequency, cutting through all Valorian communications with a priority override that should have been. Impossible. A human face appeared on the screen. An older woman with gray hair and hard eyes, wearing a uniform covered in medals and insignia. This is Admiral Chun of the United Earth Fleet, the woman said, and her voice was calm and professional and utterly without fear. We are humanity, and one of ours is aboard your flagship. The Queen watched in silence as the message continued. You have 1 solar hour to return Ambassador Kolduas unharmed. If he is returned safely, we will withdraw our forces, and there will be no further hostilities. The Admiral paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was like iron wrapped in silk. If he is harmed, if he is killed, if he is not delivered to us within the specified time, we will demonstrate why the galaxy learned to leave us alone. The message ended, and the tactical display returned to showing the human fleet, which had now grown to nearly 15,000 ships. This is impossible, one of the Queen's advisors sputtered. How did they move so many ships without our sensors detecting them? How did they know where to come? How did they organize this without our spies learning of it? We have been preparing for this for 50 years, Marcus said, drawing every eye in the chamber to him. Since your first fleet attacked Earth, and we realized that we could not simply hide from the galaxy forever. He walked toward the tactical display, and the guards parted to let him pass, too confused and frightened to know what else to do. Every ship you see out there was built in secret, Marcus continued. Every crew was trained without your knowledge. Every weapon was designed specifically to counter Valorian technology. We studied your ships, we studied your tactics, we studied everything about you. He touched the display, zooming in on one of the human vessels. This class of ship is called a Retribution, he said. It was designed with one purpose in mind: to kill Valorian warships, and it does that job very well. The Queen stared at the display, watching more human ships appear, watching her tactical advantages evaporate as the numbers continued to climb. You are still outnumbered, she said finally. My fleets are larger, my technology is more advanced, my warriors are better trained. You were right about the numbers, Marcus agreed. Your combined fleets outnumber ours by a ratio of approximately 3 to 1. And yes, your technology is more advanced in many ways. Your ships are faster, and your weapons are more powerful, and your shields are stronger. He turned to face her directly. But you are missing the most important factor. And what is that? The Queen demanded. Marcus smiled. And for the first time since his capture, it was a genuine smile. Warm and fierce and absolutely terrifying. The difference between your species and mine, he said, is why we fight. He gestured at the human fleet surrounding the system. You conquer because you can. Because it increases your power and your resources and your prestige. But at the end of the day, if the cost becomes too high, you will retreat. You will recalculate. You will find another target. His smile faded, replaced by something harder. We fight because you threatened what we love. We fight because you took one of our own. We fight because you dared to think you could attack our home and get away with it. He took a step closer to the Queen. Every single human on every single one of those ships has seen the recordings of your fleets attacking Earth. They have seen the cities you burned and the people you killed. And they have spent the last 50 years training for this moment. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They are not here because they were ordered to come. They are here because they volunteered, because they wanted to be here. Because the chance to make you pay for what you did is the only thing that has kept some of them going through years of preparation. He straightened up and spread his arms. You have never faced anything like that before. You have faced enemies who fought to defend their worlds. Enemies who fought because they had no other choice. But you have never faced an enemy who genuinely wanted to destroy you. Who would sacrifice everything, give up everything, just to ensure that you suffered. The Queen looked at the human standing before her. This soft, fragile creature from a backwater world. And for the first time in 1,000 years, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed. True fear. You are insane, she whispered. Your entire species is insane, Marcus nodded slowly. Yes, he agreed. We probably are, but that is what makes us dangerous. The clock was ticking, and the Queen had a decision to make. The hour passed in a silence, so heavy that it seemed to press down on everyone. In the throne chamber, like a physical weight, Queen Sithara sat on her throne and watched the tactical display as the human fleet continued to grow, passing 20,000 ships and still climbing. Each new arrival another nail in the coffin of her confidence. Her advisors argued around her in hushed, frantic voices, their antennae twitching with fear and confusion as they debated what to do. We must attack immediately, the war minister insisted, his armored body rigid with barely contained aggression. Our fleets outnumber them. Our technology is superior. If we strike now while they are still organizing, we can destroy them before they become a real threat. And what of the prisoner? Another advisor asked. If we attack, they will retaliate. And we have seen what humans do to those who harm their own. One human life cannot be allowed to dictate the policy of the Valorian Dominion. The war minister snapped. We are the conquerors of 87 worlds. We do not bow to threats from primitive species. The Queen listened to them argue, but her eyes never left the tactical display. and her mind was working through calculations that had nothing to do with fleet sizes or weapons yields. She was thinking about the human, standing calmly on the other side of the chamber. Watching the debate with an expression of patient interest, she was thinking about the arena and how he had defeated opponents that should have torn him apart. She was thinking about the missing fleets, millions of her warriors who had sailed toward Earth and never returned. She was thinking about something Marcus had said, about how humans did not have a breaking point, about how they had a point where they stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about revenge. And she was thinking about her empire, which had stood for 1,000 years and survived challenges that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. Would it survive this? Could it survive this? The war minister was still arguing, his voice rising with each word. And the queen finally raised one of her forelimbs in a gesture that commanded immediate silence. "Enough," she said. And her voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the chamber. "I have heard your arguments, and I have made my decision." The advisors fell silent, watching their queen with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Shar rose from her throne and walked slowly toward the tactical display, her 6 legs carrying her with the grace of a creature that had ruled worlds when most species were still learning to use tools. "Fleet Commander," she said into her communicator, "stand down all offensive preparations." The War Minister made a sound of outrage. "Your Majesty, you cannot be serious. We cannot simply surrender to these creatures." "I am not surrendering," the Queen replied without looking at him. "I am choosing not to fight a war that I cannot win." "Cannot win?" The War Minister sputtered. "We outnumber them. We outgun them. Our technology is generations ahead of theirs." "Yes," the Queen agreed. "And none of that matters." She turned to face her advisors, and her eyes were ancient and tired in a way that none of them had ever seen before. "I have ruled this dominion for 1,000 cycles," she said. "I have conquered species that had weapons capable of destroying stars. I have defeated enemies that could bend space and time to their will. I have faced every challenge the galaxy could throw at me, and I have emerged victorious." She gestured toward the tactical display. "But I have never faced anything like humans." The War Minister opened his mouth to protest, but the Queen silenced him with a look. "You think this is about numbers," she continued. "You think this is about technology and tactics and strategy, but you are wrong. This is about will. About the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory." She pointed at Marcus, who stood watching with that patient expression that had unnerved her from the first moment they met. "That human let himself be captured," she said. "He endured trials that would have broken any other species. He watched his captors study him like an insect. And he did all of this knowing that rescue might never come. Knowing that he might die alone in an enemy prison." Her voice hardened, and he did it gladly, because it meant that we would finally be found. The advisors shifted uncomfortably, beginning to understand what their queen was telling them. "If we attack," Sithara continued, "we might win the battle. We might destroy their fleet and kill their soldiers and claim victory. But it would not end there." She walked back toward her throne, a movement slow and deliberate. "Humans do not forget," she said. "They do not forgive. If we attack them today, they will spend the next 1,000 years finding ways to hurt us. They will infiltrate our worlds and sabotage our systems and assassinate our leaders. They will teach their children to hate us and their children's children after that." She sat down on her throne and looked out at her advisors with something that might have been sadness. "We could destroy Earth tomorrow," she said. "We could burn their homeworld to ash and scatter their species across the galaxy, and it would not matter. The survivors would keep fighting, keep hunting us, keep making us pay for what we did." She turned to look at Marcus. "That is what you were trying to tell me," she said. "That is the truth I needed to understand." Marcus nodded slowly. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the smartest or the fastest or the most advanced. But we are the most stubborn things the universe has ever produced. He walked toward the throne. And this time, no one moved to stop him. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day of our existence, he said. Predators hunted us. Diseases ravaged us. The climate itself turned against us, and we survived. We adapted. We overcame. We refused to die. He stopped at the base of the throne and looked up at the ancient queen. You could conquer us tomorrow, and it would mean nothing. We would simply start planning our revenge. And no matter how long it took, no matter how many generations passed, we would eventually find a way to make you pay. I believe you, the queen said. And the words seemed to cost her something. And that is why I am choosing peace. She stood and walked down from her throne. And for the first time in 1,000 years, Queen Sithara of the Valorian Dominion did something that no one in the chamber had ever seen her do. She bowed not a deep bow. Not a bow of submission, but a bow of respect. One ruler to another, return the human to his people, she commanded, and her voice was steady and clear. And send word to all Valorian territories. Earth is to be left alone. Permanently, the advisors and guards stared in shock. Unable to process what they were seeing, Marcus bowed in return, and when he straightened, there was something that might have been sympathy in his eyes. For what it is worth, he said. I am sorry it had to be this way, as am I, the queen replied. But I am old enough to recognize when I have met my equal, and wise enough to know when fighting would only lead to mutual destruction. She gestured toward the door. Go to your people, Ambassador Cole, and tell them that the Valorian Dominion offers peace. Marcus nodded and began to walk toward the exit. Escorted now by guards who treated him not as a prisoner, but as a diplomat, he had almost reached the door when the queen called out to him. One question, she said. Before you go, Marcus stopped and turned. What would your people have done? The queen asked, if I had chosen to fight, if I had refused to return you, what would they have done? Marcus stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from the corridor beyond. And when he spoke, there was no threat in his voice. Only a simple statement of fact. Everything, he said. We would have done everything. He paused for a moment. And the queen saw something in his eyes that she had never seen in any species she had conquered. It was not hatred. It was not bloodlust. It was something older and deeper and far more terrifying. It was love. Love for his world. Love for his people. Love strong enough to make him sacrifice himself without hesitation. Strong enough to make an entire species ready to die for revenge. We would have burned every world you hold, Marcus continued. We would have hunted every ship you commanded. We would have followed you to the edge of the galaxy and beyond. And we would not have stopped ever until either you were destroyed or we were. He smiled. And it was the saddest smile the queen had ever seen. That is what we are, he said. That is what you almost awakened. Be grateful that you chose peace. Because if you had not, he shook his head. Well, the galaxy is a big place. But it is not big enough for both of us if we had truly gone to war. The doors closed behind him, and Queen Sithara was left alone with her advisors, and her thoughts and the tactical display that still showed nearly 30,000 human ships. Surrounding her homeworld, she watched as a small shuttle launched from the flagship and flew toward the human fleet, carrying the ambassador back to his people, and she watched as the human ships began to withdraw, their weapons powering down, their aggressor formations dissolving into something more relaxed. They were keeping their word. She had given them back their diplomat, and they were leaving just as they had promised. The war minister stepped forward, his earlier outrage replaced by confusion. Your Majesty, he said carefully, I do not understand. We had the advantage. We could have won. The queen turned to look at him with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. No, she said quietly. We could not have. She looked back at the display, watching the human ships disappear one by one as they jumped back into faster-than-light travel. That human was Ree.